Hi, everyone. My name's Melissa, and this is Ange, and we're the Women's Student Association presidents at HBS. And we're so excited to welcome you here today to the annual Dynamic Women in Business Conference. The conference is such a point of pride for the WSA. It's by far our biggest event of the year, and we feel it really showcases the breadth of what the WSA does at HBS. From celebrating women and their successes, to providing them with the forum to meet and be inspired by each other.
We are particularly excited this year to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the conference as we reflect on the last quarter century of progress and build momentum for the next 25. We're also building momentum on Twitter. Hashtag Shaping the Next 25 is trending, so get involved. To celebrate this milestone, we now have some short remarks before our next keynote by Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Good morning. I would much rather be with you in person today for the 25th annual Dynamic Women in Business Conference, but I'm afraid we're just going to have to do this by video. So I want to thank the Harvard Women's Student Association for inviting me to join you today. And I really wanted to be here because I know that this is a celebration of the conference's 25-year history and that you are focusing on shaping the next 25. You know, it's a great pivot point, the progress we've made so far and the work we still need to do. The progress so far? Well, back during my second year in law school, I applied for a summer associate job at a law firm on Wall Street, and at the time, there were almost no women working in Wall Street law firms. So I interviewed with several firms, and every single person who interviewed me was a man. A lot of them have blurred together in my memory, but one stands out in particular. I still remember he had this huge corner office and this big leather chair, and he held my resume, and the silence stretched out as he kept looking over it, and I'm sitting in this little chair across from it. Finally, he puts the thing down, he looks up, and he scowls at me. There's a typographical error in your resume. Should I take that as a sign of the quality of work you do? And before I could think, I snapped back. You should take it as a sign that you better not hire me to type. He jumped and then he laughed. I went through my resume a zillion times on the train ride home. I swear to you, there was not a typo. He was just being a jerk. But I hadn't apologized, I hadn't made excuses, I hadn't cried, I acted like one of the guys, and I passed his test. But I wasn't one of the guys. I was a mom, I had a family. I graduated from law school 9 months pregnant with baby number 2, which made me 100% unemployable. Back then, nobody was gonna hire me. And I thought I had pretty much lost any chance of ever working in law. But you work with what you've got, so I hung out a shingle in front of our house and I practiced law out of our living room. Now, that was a while back, and since then we have made some real progress. But there is still a lot of work to do. In 2012, women made up 54% of the financial services workforce, all the banking and Wall Street and all that, 54%. But they made up only 16% of senior executives. And how about that corner office? Not one of the CEOs was a woman. That's an entire industry, and that's not an accident, that's a culture. One part of how we change that culture is to get out there and make our voices heard. Throughout my career, I've gotten the message loud and clear that some people would like for me just to shut up and go home. But I've learned something else from my time working in areas dominated by men. If you don't have a seat at the table, you're probably on the menu. I'm glad that you are holding this conference today. And I'm glad that you're talking about how to build more opportunities for women in business, because together, that's how we'll keep making change.
It is now my honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Katrina Lake. Stitch Fix, a personal styling service that delivers a tailored selection of clothing and accessories directly to your door. Katrina founded Stitch Fix while a student here at Harvard Business School. Since graduating in 2011, she has been focused on aggressively growing the company. Katrina is passionate about helping women achieve everyday confidence. Prior to founding Stitch Fix, Katrina worked at the social e-commerce company Polyvore, which allowed her to work at the intersection of fashion, retail, and technology. Katrina also consulted with a variety of e-commerce and traditional retailers during her time at the Parthenon Group. Katrina holds a Bachelor of Science in Economics from Stanford University and an MBA from Harvard Business School. And she also serves on the board of directors for food delivery service Grubhub. Please join me in welcoming Katrina.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for being here. It's really wonderful to be back on campus, it was really inspiring to hear Senator Warren's remarks, and it's going to be a good segue into what we'll talk about here. Let me make sure this works. I'm really excited that you guys are all here. I think especially in my time since HBS, I've really recognized the value of getting this community together and to really start to talk and really create the vision for what women's role is going to be in leadership. Oops. All right. We're going to work with this. So I'm going to start with my story. I have two incredible stories in my family's history and my past that has had a huge impact on who I am and how I see the world. So I want to start with those. I'm half Japanese. This is my grandmother on my Japanese side. We call her Obachan. She was the first feminist that I knew. She was born in Japan at a time when there were limited opportunities for women in Japan, and she grew up really idolizing American culture, and so she had some exposure to American TV shows and American movies, and her whole life she dreamed of being an American someday. I think she was like a teenager during World War II and remembers, and she has all these memories of it was hard in Japan during that time, and even though she was Japanese, that she always felt like she wanted the US to win, and she wanted to be part of that and wanted to be an American, and so she would tell a story about how she was silently cheering when the US won the war. She was in an arranged marriage. She had two daughters, one of whom is my mom. And she really kind of cultivated this feminism within her daughters. And so with her daughters, she really inspired in them that they could do anything and they could go anywhere. And so she was very happy when they decided, after college, both of them decided to go to graduate school in Minneapolis, of all places. So my grandmother was very happy to have them in the United States, and it was part of her dream being achieved. And a few years later, she actually packed up her stuff and she left my grandfather and didn't speak any English and moved to Minneapolis and got an apartment and lived by herself in this apartment, trying to learn English and making her life and making her vision the way she imagined it to be here in the US for 20 years. And it's always been such an inspiration to me that somebody in such a different world, in such a different place, could dream of what their life could be like, and then to be able to actually achieve that was always something that was just an incredible impression in who I became. The other example is, and this is my great-grandmother on my American side. So this is my grandfather's mother. My grandfather's father passed away very suddenly when he was like 2 years old. So he really never even knew what it was like to have a father. So this woman, Anna, her husband suddenly passed away, and her sister actually also had a husband who had passed away. So between the two of them, this is 1928, they have 5 kids between the two of them, and they're 2 single widowed mothers. And the two of them, what they decided to do was to combine their families. So they combined their families, and one was going to go to work, and one was going to stay at home and raise the kids, all 5 of them. And so my great-grandmother got a job at Herberger's, which you may not know what it is, but it's a department store in Minneapolis, or outside of Minneapolis. And that's where she would become a lifetime employee, actually, was at Herberger's, to be able to create the income so that they could raise 5 kids together. So the only life that my grandfather knew was one that was led by two amazing, incredible women that were making it work. And so he really instilled in me the feeling that I could do anything. And he was a math teacher, and he taught me math and science. And he was actually the first one to show me how to use a computer and encourage me to understand how computers work. And his vision of me really had a huge impact on who I was, or who I became and who I am now. So as a result of these influences in my life, I really have always felt this massive opportunity and this massive amount of possibility to be able to see these two women who kind of refused the cards that they were dealt and were able to create these lives for themselves that, were not average, were totally abnormal, and some people would say crazy, and that they were actually able to do it and do it well, has been such an inspiration for me. And I really believe it's the greatest gift that I got, was to be able to view the world through this lens of boundaryless possibility. So this is a bit of a segue into the Stitch Fix story. To share a little bit of my journey of how I started the company and who we are. I was really an entrepreneur in part by process of elimination. So I spent a couple of years in retail, and I had a couple of theses. Firstly, I thought that retail was a really interesting, ripe area for disruption. We've all started to see comp store sales decrease in stores. We've all started to see how hard it is to make the math work when your store used to do, $3 million in revenue, and if it's doing 10% less or 15% less as more and more dollars shift online. It's an interesting dynamic, and I felt like one that retailers weren't being nimble enough to address. And so I thought it was just the industry in general I thought was interesting. The second thing that I thought was really interesting was that I felt like a lot of the innovation that was happening in retail didn't match with the customer value proposition. So there's a lot of innovation that's happening around how do you get things cheapest and fastest in retail? How do you get things shipping next day? How do I find the absolute cheapest thing on the planet? And when it actually comes down to it, women are not looking for the black dress that's cheapest and fastest. They're looking for the black dress that fits them best, that makes them feel most confident, that is best for their body. And I felt like there was a total lack of innovation to be able to address why clothes are actually important in people's lives. So I felt like there was this real opportunity to be able to transform how we thought about retail and to be able to personalize better through technology and data. So I was really on this journey to find a company to join. So I did consulting for a couple of years. I actually interviewed at a bunch of retailers. I considered taking a job at Starbucks and kind of ultimately decided that wasn't exactly what I was looking for. So I went into venture capital for 2 years thinking this will be a great way for me to see hundreds of companies and to be able to identify the one that's the company I want to work for and join that. And ultimately didn't find that company, but through that met hundreds of entrepreneurs and met many entrepreneurs who didn't necessarily look like Mark Zuckerberg or Steve Jobs, and it gave me a little bit of confidence that this was something that I could start on my own. So I applied to business school with the intention that, with the goal really to be able to have a company off the ground, up and running, paying myself a salary by the time I graduate. So the way that I did that, just kind of quickly to go through these, the MVP that I did was a true scrappy, totally minimum viable situation. And so what I would do is I had a credit card that had a $6,000 limit. I would buy it retail, I would sell it retail, and try to simulate the way Stitch Fix worked. So I would get introduced to friends and friends. I'm from California. I was here in Boston when I started, so it was easy to find people that I didn't know. And I would get introduced to friends, and I would start to simulate. If you fill out a survey, we have inventory that resembles what Stitch Fix inventory would look like, so that I could start kind of testing and exploring. The data-driven part was really important because, I think I'm a relatively risk-averse entrepreneur, truly. Like, I'm not doing this because I love to be in charge. I'm not doing this because I love to take risks. In fact, it's quite the opposite. And so for me, to be really structured around what does success look like, and to be structured around what do I have to see in order to know that this is going to work, and this is going to be something I want to invest my life in, was really important. So in late 2010, started testing the concept. In January of 2011, spent a lot of time out in California talking to investors, talking to future advisors. And then in February of 2011, got our first term sheet. In April, started shipping fixes out of my apartment here in Cambridge at 41 Hawthorne. And in May, graduated from school and then moved the company out in June. A couple of other things that I think that we did early that was really important was that we did a lot of testing before we built things. And so we didn't even have a website for the first 6 months. We had a landing page, you could get rerouted to fill out a survey, and then we did everything through kind of SurveyMonkey and through PayPal at the time, and really did everything kind of the scrappy way, knowing that someday we would be able to create more technology around it. And so to be able to know what we were building by the time we built it was super important. And the other thing is in this business, we carry inventory. And so not getting in front of our skis and to be able to scale in a slow and smart way so that we could learn along the way was incredibly important to kind of the foundation and formation of the company. So the business model and what do we actually do? So Stitch Fix is a truly client-centric business at its core. So the way it works is a client signs up, she lets us know her general size and style preferences, and then based on that, we'll have a stylist who will put together 5 items for her to try on at home so that she can try and buy at home, so that she can kind of simply keep what she wants, send back what she doesn't want, and so it's truly a personal shopping model, but at a price point that's much more accessible. So our price point is around $50. On the surface, this seems relatively easy. I think many of us can think, oh, I know this friend, and I could definitely send her 5 things she likes. And I think there's an element of that we love, actually, that people can relate to it, understand it, and it's easy. Behind the scenes is really, really difficult, and I think especially in the early days, it was very, very difficult. And that's really because when, the business model itself is actually more like a Macy's or a Bloomingdale's. So we're buying it wholesale, we're selling it retail, we buy from hundreds of brands. And one of the hardest things that we do is that we're buying product today for 3 to 9 months from now. And so we're trying to guess how many customers are we gonna have in general. We're also trying to guess what % of our customers are gonna want red pants, what % of our customers are gonna be a certain inseam. And for all of those reasons, for this model, the data and the kind of analytics behind what we do is incredibly important. So we're able to use data and analytics all throughout our supply chain, starting with our buyers, as our buyers are trying to figure out how relevant is this blazer for our audience, or does this moto jacket, is this going to be interesting enough for enough customers for me to buy it, or what percentage of these white jeans that I'm going to buy should be in different inseams. And so even in our buying process, it's really valuable. And it's also really valuable for us as our stylists are sending out product. And so when our stylists are putting these fixes together, the stylists have at their fingertips these kind of best-in-class tools and an algorithm that's highly predictive, so that when she's trying to decide which flared jeans that you want to try, should you try, she's going to have with a pretty high degree of accuracy based on your body and based on people who are similar to you and their experience with those jeans, which ones are more or less likely to work. These are all the portions that work together. On the technology side, it's important that we're in Silicon Valley because we have over 100 technologists at Stitch Fix. We have 60 data scientists, over 50 of whom have PhDs. And there's a lot of science that goes into making this model scalable, and a lot of science around making sure that when somebody signs up, that we're going to be able to get them 5 things that they're going to love. So one of the valuable parts is actually the feedback and the trial element. So we have this incredible amount of data that really at this point only us have about what kind of clothes work on different types of bodies and what works for certain types of people and the feedback that customers are giving us along the way. And that really enables us to get better over time. So as somebody gets multiple fixes and they tell us, like, I like blue, but I don't like this color of cobalt, or they tell us, these jeans fit me perfectly, these other ones were too big in the thighs, all of that feedback actually helps us to get to know that client over time, but more importantly, it helps us to get to know the aggregate over time. So there's this huge positive feedback loop of the whole system getting smarter as we have more data. And so what we hear when Stitch Fix really works, and we're not 100% of the way there yet, but what we hear when it really works for clients is we hear, I tried on 20 pairs of jeans at a Macy's and I can't believe that you guys sent me just one and they fit me. And we hear, I never would have tried this dress on in a store, but I found this dress and I've already worn it 3 times this week, don't tell anybody. And we hear, and what's unique about those experiences is that even if these clients had spent hours and hours in stores or had spent hours and hours looking online, that they wouldn't have been able to have achieved as good of a result as they did with their stylist of ours. And I think the aspiration is that we should be able to do that, and we should be able to do that 100% of the time. In the same way that all of us in this room are educated, smart people that are very capable, that can probably change our own oil in our car if we wanted to, like, why would we ever do that when there's an expert that can do that better? And I think in the same way, if you've been seeing culottes and you've been coveting culottes and you really want to try some, why should you be going on the websites of Banana Republic and J. Crew and Macy's and Nordstrom and learning the culotte market and researching all these culottes so that you can buy the best ones for you? Like, it's silly. And so I think this future of how experts and experts powered by amazing data and algorithms is really going to be the future of how we buy. So we don't share a ton in the way of numbers of our business, but we've had many milestones and we've had many things to celebrate. But really, one of the things I'm most proud of is the how and who of who we are. So in my venture of starting this company, I was very literally creating the company that I wanted to join, and I'm so proud of the many ways in which that's true. So this is a company that's incredibly, relentlessly client-focused, full of smart, kind, and talented people. And when I was kind of in the audience like you, just figuring out, like, who would I love to learn from? Who would I love to work with? We're very proud that our head of people was the head of people at Lululemon, and that Eric, who runs our data science team, ran all of algorithms, analytics, and engineering at Netflix. And Mike, who runs our operations, was the COO of Walmart.com. And so it's really amazing to be able to get this high caliber of people together. And really, I think the diversity is something I'm really proud of as well, which, in part, it speaks to demographic diversity and some of the things we'll talk about with women. But I think another element of diversity also is just having the diversity in terms of skills and talent. And so to be able to have stylists working along data scientists who are working alongside engineers and merchants is a really, really amazing kind of collaborative, fun, energizing place to work. And I'm very proud to have started the company, but I'm even prouder to be able to work at the company that I dreamed that I could join. So today we have over 4,000 employees. We've created over 4,000 jobs. And I'm very proud of the role of women in our company. So 50% of our board is comprised of women, 62% of our C-suite is comprised of women, and 55% of our leadership, which I define here as kind of our director level and above, 55% of our director level and above is comprised of women. I'm clearly not very good at this. Okay. So while I'm really proud of what we've done at Stitch Fix, unfortunately, this isn't the average experience in retail. It's actually not even a normal experience in retail, and it's quite different from what we see in the space. So we'll get you guys in the conversation. So what percent, let's define this as Fortune 500. So a poll of the audience. What percent of Fortune 500 companies do you think are run by women? Let's start at 50%. Anybody? 30, a third of companies? 17, 10%? 5%? All right. The reality, so we'll go left to right here. The reality of the perception is super interesting. So I think this is in part because of the rise of women like Sheryl Sandberg and Oprah and Marissa Mayer. But the perception when you ask a group like this, and actually I think this poll is of executives. So when you ask the average American executives what percent of leadership or what percent of CEO roles, are filled by women, what people expect is 23%. Which is awesome. I think it's great that women are out there. I think it's great that people have that perception. Unfortunately, that's not reality. So when you look at the Fortune 500, it's a mere 4.6%. And if you look to retail, and it just breaks my heart that retail is so low. So our retailers are the people who are selling cosmetics. They're selling Tide to moms. They're selling the apparel that you're wearing. And of those companies, only 6 of the top 100 are led by women. So if we look beyond CEO, and let's just look at the C-suite, we hear a lot about technology, so I thought it'd be interesting to do a side-by-side here with technology. Especially in Silicon Valley, we hear a lot about the role of women in technology, how few women there are in leadership roles, and how it's a huge problem, and it's a big thing we talk about in Silicon Valley. And it's true, so only 15% of the C-suites of technology companies are filled by women. And if you look at, you can see there's a little bit of a funnel problem in technology, and so we're only having 37% enter the workforce, and they're only filtering to be 15%. What is really sad is that retail is worse. Not only are there fewer women in the C-suites of retail companies, but the funnel is way steeper. And so if you look at these two, if there are a proportional number of women that were entering the industry as progressing to the C-suite, you'd see 2.5 times more women in technology, and you'd see 3.75 times more women in retail. And again, the fact that we are seeing more women who are selling hardware and SaaS than we are selling cosmetics and apparel is shocking to me, and I think something that I would love to see change. So a bit of a segue into what I've learned. I think whether we're fighting the good fight of climbing up the ranks in retail, or we're creating our own realities and creating our own companies and creating our own places to work, I have a few thoughts on what I hope for of things that we can do or things that I hope can change. Firstly, invest in women. First and foremost, there have to be more women VCs, and there have to be more dollars flowing to women. 94% of venture capitalists are men, and an even larger percent of the dollars that are invested are by men. And the problem here, and so I'll share a personal story of my own from fundraising. Stitch Fix was an incredibly difficult company to fundraise for. There are all kinds of reasons for that, one of which is that we carry inventory and investors are imagining millions of dollars getting buying all these dresses, and part of that is true, and it's something VCs don't love. But another element of it was, frankly, the industry and the customer that we were serving. And so I've always been very data-driven, and our business has always had great data, and their fundraising was really hard for a long period of time, despite what the data showed. And so we would get to the final rounds of many VC funds, we'd get to the last round, we'd meet the whole partnership, do the whole song and dance, bring the whole management team in, and kind of at the very last step be told that they weren't interested. And I had one VC who was really honest with me, and I really appreciate his honesty. And what he shared was he was like, look, I get to take 1 or 2 board seats a year. And this is a VC that I really respect. And he's like, I get to take 1 or 2 board seats a year. And as I think about the board seats that I want to take board seats where I feel really passionate about the business and where I feel like I can add a lot of value in the boardroom. And he was like, in this business, he's like, I just don't feel like I can get passionate about women's dresses, and I just don't feel like I can add that much value to you. Like, I don't really know retail. And it was really hard, because I think at the individual level, I can't blame him for that. If I was a VC, I wouldn't be interested in hunting or fishing or video games. Like, there are all these industries where I would feel like I would not be able to add value as a board member. And so at the individual level, it's hard to blame him for that. But if you think about 94% of people in that industry who are deciding who's getting money and who's building company and who's creating company cultures, it's really a problem that this systematic bias is happening at the investor level. I'm optimistic about this. There's more women VCs than there have been in the past, and the percentage of entrepreneurs that are women that are getting funded, it looks like, has been increasing. And so, at the very least, through pattern recognition of VCs seeing that women CEOs can be successful, I think some of this will start to change slowly. But I think this is a huge, huge problem that we're having in terms of who's getting capital and who's starting companies. Not all of us in this room are going to get to have a choice of investing in women, but there are things that you can do also. Investing in other women in terms of your expertise, in terms of your time, and helping others. I think, to be able to create an environment where people are getting the help that would be similar to a VC network, but through these networks like the people in this room, is something that we can all do. And relatedly, finding and being good mentors. I was so lucky. So my summer in between my first year and my second year, I worked at a company called Polyvore, and spent some time there, afterwards. But and Sukhinder Singh Cassidy was the CEO there. So firstly, I would say, if you have choices in your career to make job selections based on the network and the mentors and the people that you're going to be able to get as support networks throughout, I would optimize for that. And this job, I kind of had proactively figured out a few companies that I thought I wanted to work for, and I had basically cold called people, and Sukhinder had called me and given me like 10 minutes to decide if I was going to join her or not. And I thought, this is like a powerful woman CEO that I'd love to learn from, and so I, on a whim, took the job. And it was an incredible opportunity where I got to understand what a startup looked like and to be able to understand what it's like to work for her. But most importantly, she and I had a really strong relationship that would go past Polyvore. And so she actually turned out to be our very first investor. She was the one who introduced me to the seed investor that first invested in Stitch Fix. And so that one relationship alone was a linchpin in the career that I had. And I feel very inspired to pass that on. And so I try to mentor a couple companies at a time and try to do my best to kind of pay it forward. But I certainly was a recipient of great mentorship and would encourage all of you to mentor others and find great mentors and to keep that cycle going. The other thing here is clear, objective approaches to success. So there's two things here, I think. Firstly is, as we think about the companies and the cultures we're creating, to be able to have goals that are objective and to be able to reward people based on their results rather than the hours they're putting in or where they're putting in their hours or how they're putting in their hours is something that really fosters women to be able to be successful. So at Stitch Fix, we have many women who leave every day at 4:45 because they need to pick up their kids and they may be working later on at night, and that's totally fine. And the culture that we have is one that really accepts that and really embraces people to be able to be productive from wherever they are. The other thing here is market-based pay. We should all be pushing for market-based pay. And what that does is it really reduces bias in the system. And so at Stitch Fix, when we're deciding how we're going to pay people, we're using the survey that we have that based on your geography, based on your title, based on your years of experience, allows us to be able to know what is the market pay. And one of those inputs is not gender. And so what it does is it helps us to be able to create guidelines so that we're not getting affected by who's the loudest voice or who's the most influential. And it's really been something that I think has transformed the way that we think about compensation. Is something that I would love to see more broadly applied. And very last, before I open it up for questions, is something that every single one of us can do no matter where we are in companies or outside of companies. And that's really to show and celebrate possibility, to make the success of women known, to be able to celebrate the stories of success, of stories of impossible things happening, of women doing incredible things, and to really continue to show what it looks like for women to be successful in this world. And I know for me, it was such a hugely positive influence in my life to be able to see all these women that had done incredible things. And it's something that, I really hope that we can bring to each other, that we can bring to our children, that we can bring to our nieces and nephews, this sense of boundaryless possibility. So with that, I hope that in whatever small way that Stitch Fix is changing and creating a new reality in leadership, but it's really not just my fight or Stitch Fix's fight. It's really up to all of us to be able to create the vision for the kinds of opportunities we want, the kinds of opportunities that we want our children to have, and the companies that we want our children to work for. And it's something that we can all really create together. So I hope that you feel inspired and can inspire others to create this new reality for women in leadership. We've got about 10 minutes for questions. And it looks like there's mics. We'll start over here.
I'm short. Hi, you mentioned in your presentation that you're a very risk-averse CEO and entrepreneur. Do you find that a lot of female entrepreneurs that you have come across are also risk-averse? Do you think that's because you are a woman, or do you think is that the norm? That's
a good question. I don't know that I've seen it translate as much on gender. The honest truth is, I think I've seen it in both ways. I think that for me, it's important. I actually feel like I'm a very good CEO. And I'm a good CEO because I'm motivated by the things that I was motivated of being able to find this company and culture that I wanted to work for, rather than kind of being king or being in charge. So I really do feel like I want to show the path of being risk averse and being able to start a company and to encourage that for many more people. I think on the question of if it's related to gender, I think it can go both ways. I think, in a lot of households, even today, even though things are starting to change, women actually have an option in many cases to work or not work. And so, I think the bar ends up, I've experienced at least that, the bar for women who have that option to work or not work is really high. And so whether it's starting something where they feel really connected to the work that they're doing, or feeling like they have to be working at a company where they really feel rewarded by what they're doing, or else they'd rather not work, is kind of an interesting dynamic. So to be honest, I've seen it kind of go in both ways with women. But for all of you who feel like you're a risk-averse person but would love to do something like this and would be good at something like this, my hope is that I can show you that it's possible and there's a path there. We'll jump to this side.
Hi. I was just wondering, so you touched on the idea of market-based pay, and I think a lot of us have heard of income inequality as an issue that women face in the workplace. So I was kind of wondering how you balance this market-based pay concept while also rewarding people for outsized performance in the workplace.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And at Stitch Fix, what we do is we use market-based pay as the approach, and if you're not performing, you shouldn't be here, is really the approach that we use. And so we use the market-based pay on salary, and we actually do use it on equity also, but equity obviously is kind of the more, juicy part of the package. But I mean, it doesn't come without its challenges. So we do performance reviews separate from pay, and if people are interested in working at a company where if they work the hardest they're going to get paid the most, that's not a company that's like us. So we're, the way that we control for that's not the right way, but we're very transparent about the way that we pay people, and we talk about it early in the interview process, so that if kind of our pay philosophy doesn't align with what you're looking for, that it may not be a fit.
Sorry, just one follow-up. How do you find yourself rewarding top performers, like in terms of, the performance reviews? How does that reflect on?
So the honest truth is that we don't. I mean, we hire top performers, we retain top performers, and if you're not performing, you're not going to be here, is really the way that we approach it. And we don't try to say, like, this person is in the top 10% and this person is in the top 20%. So, I think that is potentially the downside, and if you require a company where you need everybody to feel like they need in the top 10%, then it may not work as a pay philosophy for that company. But for us, the philosophy is we expect that you're a high performer, and if you're not performing, you won't be here.
Awesome.
Hi. I just want to say that your story was very personally and professionally inspiring. I'm also biracial. I'm half Korean, half Italian, and it's great to see women of color up on the stage. My question is about data. I'm a big fan of using data and basing strategic decisions on the use of data. Your slide about unstructured and structured data, if you could just talk a little bit about how you collect that data and I guess the difference, first of all, what the difference is between those two types of data and how you apply it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try to answer this quickly. I could talk about this for a whole other session. I love data also, and we use a lot of structured and unstructured data. And so structured data is basically when, in the return survey, for example, we ask you, how did you like the price? Was this too expensive? Did this fit you? Was it too big, too small? So when you fill out those kind of bubbles, that's structured data. And then the unstructured data is when you say, like, in the feedback, you might say, like, I like blue, but I don't like this cobalt, or whatever it is, and adding that additional color is the unstructured data. So we use both. So And there's also big data and small data, which is kind of different from structured to unstructured. And we talk about the value of small data, which is the difference between big data and small data is like Yahoo has a 200-page paper that's like how you can analyze all of somebody's search history to be able to determine with 60% accuracy if somebody is male or female. And like our small data approach is we just ask her. And so the small data is incredibly valuable for us because it's high signal, it's very accurate, and so we just ask, what kind of denim are you looking for? What size are you? And so all of these things, we can just actually get the data and then be able to action on it. And so the structured data is easy for that. The unstructured data we use a ton, and so the data science team that we have, without getting super nerdy here, they can use natural language processing. And so, for example, we can see when somebody checks out and, I don't know, they buy like a cute sequin tank top or something, and they say, this is so great, I'm gonna wear this on my date night next week. And then, let's say 2 months later, somebody comes in and says, I'm looking for something for a date night. Then our data science team can use natural language processing to analyze all the things that people have said in the past. I'm going to wear this for a date night, or I'm so excited to wear this on a date. And then to be able to know then that those are going to be things that are good for dates and be able to recommend those to somebody who's looking for date night things, or recommend it to the stylist for someone who's looking for it there. So we're able to use both unstructured and structured data in really powerful ways. But I think the thing that I'm the biggest advocate for is small data, of like being able to find high signal, really actionable data to be able to work with. It's a good question.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. I have a question about venture capital funding, and I'm wondering why you think women are so underrepresented with VC firms, and how you overcame that as an entrepreneur when you were looking for funding.
Yeah, I think, well, I'll answer the second question first because I think it's easier. I don't know that I necessarily overcame it. Like in the larger world of companies and like companies that have gotten to our scale, we didn't raise that much money. Like I wasn't that good at raising money. I hated doing it. And so my approach was actually more, how can we build a strong, healthy business that doesn't require a lot of VC funding? So we haven't raised money in, I think, a couple of years now. And that was all very deliberate, to really focus on building a healthy business so that we wouldn't be reliant on raising money, because I hated it and it was hard. So to answer your first question, I don't know. I think there's a bunch of different things. I think one thing in VC, your network is really important, and people keep funding the same people over and over again. And so a lot of those networks are, like PayPal's a great example. Like PayPal, there were like 15 men or something that started PayPal, and now all of them are either starting companies or are VCs, and it's this, kind of small network that keeps on churning out companies. And so I think part of it is the network that's perpetuating itself. Part of it, and I have to blame, I probably need to take part of the blame for this. Like there are a very traditional path into getting into VC is you start a company, you're successful, and then you go into VC. I don't know, like I'm just not that interested in being a VC, and like in my heart of hearts, I wish I was, because I think that if I could say 10 years from now I want to be funding women and funding companies, that would be awesome if somebody like me would do that, but I don't know that I'm going to do that, and it's not, I don't know, it's a tough environment, and there aren't that many other women in it, and I honestly don't really know, but what I do know is that we deserve better, and we need to change it.
Thank you.